Hello. So many new
Hello.
people.
There we go.
Hello.
We've all been beamed up.
Because they'll be turned off
Don't.
when you join.
Yep, the cameras.
Oh.
There
Hello.
we go.
Welcome.
Hello.
How goes everybody?
We've
Hello.
been beamed from the green room to the live room.
Hi, Jessie. Long time, first time.
Yeah, I know it's one of those weird moments. Sorry, I'm just seeing so many people. I'm just like, we have spoken. All of us have spoken before, at least in some way, shape, or form. But I've never actually interacted with you with voices and actually get to like have responses in real time. Hello, it's the weird parasocial / we're all YouTubers thing.
My Star Trek companion.
Exactly. How you doing? And also introduce yourselves. Let everyone know who you are. Tristan? Why don't we? Since you mentioned Star Trek, I will give you the floor first.
The Star Trek privilege. My name is Tristan. I'm a history YouTuber, and I've been a really big fan of Jessie since Jessie's channel was itty bitty, and so I'm very happy to see all the things she's doing.
Oh yeah, and I love your videos. You do great videos on politics, and you are
thanks.
amazing. But Lily, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Took me a minute to realize we were actually live there, but I guess I'm talking to like 400 people.
You are.
My name is Lily Alexander. I am a filmy, righty kind of lady, I guess. I do videos on art, gender, kind of like how all this interacts with technology, social media. And I am such a fan of Jessie, so I'm so happy to be here.
I adore your work. Everyone should. If you like my stuff, you will love Lily's stuff. Like some of the best content that I've seen. Your video on like aging and transness is gorgeous and beautiful, and I love it.
That video meant a lot to me. Thank you for it. Like,
That's
seriously.
nice, y'all. That's so sweet.
Who wants to go next? Thomas, if you want to go next.
Hi, I'm Thomas. I think we've interacted in the Slack.
We have, yeah.
For people who don't know me, I'm also part of Nebula. I make a lot of nerdy videos about Notion and programming and stuff. And yeah, just very excited for this whole stream and the whole project. I saw some of the behind the scenes stuff in your original launch video, and I was like trying to spot a bunch of the tech you were using. So just very excited for this whole project.
Oh, thank you so much. And I adore your stuff. I almost never understand it half the time because I'm like, techie stuff is like, I'm a nerd, but not that kind of nerd, but I also adore everything you do. And it's great to officially like meet you and say hi outside of Slack spaces.
Likewise. Yeah, I'm into the techie stuff and then you're into the Trekkie stuff. But I have seen a little bit of DS9.
Good. That honestly, if you're gonna say anyone, that's the one I'd be like, good. You've hit the best one.
That's how I hooked
enjoyed
my
it
wife.
so far. Is it?
Yeah. It's the best and worst intro. Speaking of intros, maybe we should finish those first.
Yes, Daniel. Hello.
Did someone say nerdy stuff? I'm here to represent this as far as into the nerdy stuff as you can. So hi, my name is Dan. What do I do? I make videos on programming. But in theory, what I try to do is look at the fun, creative side of programming and allow people to play and experiment, and express themselves through code beyond just the depths of computer science things. So so the channel's called The Coding Train. I also teach classes at NYU in the same topic, and I am thrilled to be here. I was so excited to hear about this project. I was so excited to hear that Nebula is supporting and producing this project. So anything I can do to participate and help and cheer from the sidelines, I'm just thrilled.
Well, I'm so glad to have you here, and it was great to like officially meet you way back
Yes.
at the Nebula event. It's great to have you here, and
Yeah.
thank you for joining last minute. By the way, it was great to have you.
Of course.
Yeah. And Jeffrey, good to see you.
Hey, how you doing?
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. You just kicked out my co-partner in crime, Matt, so figured, you had to get a little more extra credits in here.
Get the representation. Hello, welcome. Also, I love your background, by the way. It's freaking nerdy as all hell.
I've been a video game designer since the late 90s and have worked on so many games. There is no way I cannot have an entire background full of nerdy stuff.
Yeah, I saw some of the games you've worked on, and when I was a little kid, I used to watch my dad play EverQuest. So.
That was my very first commercial game.
Oh my god! I see.
That's awesome.
Bonkers.
Really?
I was
So I
not.
saw it, I was like, oh my god!
I was not allowed to buy
The 3-year-old
EverQuest.
me watching.
My mom wouldn't let me play EverQuest because like it was like internet stuff, and it's like, no, you can't touch that. That's dangerous.
if people in chat don't know, EverQuest was like WoW before WoW released.
It was the first 3D MMO and was the biggest in the world up until WoW came out.
God dang.
So
Yeah.
from about
Yeah, it was
99
massive.
through 05, I think.
I remember.
That sounds right.
I remember as a kid, I would literally like go to like the computer game section. It was like the StarCraft battle chest, and then EverQuest above it. And then I was like always like look at that, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah, legitimately, my mom was like, "You're not allowed to touch that because you'll meet strangers on the internet."
Oh, remember the
I think it was
days?
the same for us.
Yeah.
The internet is a dangerous place. Do not go
Are we
there.
are we going to talk about Ultima next? Because that was my game. guys.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
For Ultima Online, the lead designer is Raf Costa, who also lives in San Diego, like 20 miles from me. We like
Oh wow!
do together.
Oh,
That's awesome.
I grew up with
Like,
a cousin
yes.
who was about 15 years older than me. And he kind of was like an older brother, but
I
there was
don't
like
know.
he was an Asheron's call head, and I remember being like 7 years old, and every time like being like, "Are you done for the day? Can I go? Can I just go mess around, not knowing anything about how
Oh,
games work?"
yeah, that's what
That was the three. It was Ultima Online, Asheron's Call, and EverQuest. Asheron's Call, the lead designer was Toby Reganey, and I worked with him on another game, The Matrix Online.
Oh,
And I got
speak of the
to work
devil.
with
Yeah.
Wachowski.
I remember
You
that
went to the Matrix
game.
Online. That's so cool.
You just mentioned the Matrix in a transgender stream. You might have a
Yeah,
problem.
This is huge.
There we
We're gonna
go.
carry you out of here.
I made a video called the Matrix is intrinsically trans.
Yeah.
Oh god, is that like a year and a half ago?
Yeah, I
Jesse,
think
do
so.
you remember?
I think
Yeah,
so,
it
yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might have just become the hero of the entire stream.
You guys get a better hero than me. I will say the Wachowskis were super cool in person, like the 2 times I met them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it was really funny because they wanted the story they wanted in that video game. Like I was helping out because I was leading a DC Comics game, but the Matrix was the sister team, so I got pulled in to like help on things. And they're like, "We want to write the story, but we don't have time." We're like, "Well, how you want to do that?" They're like, "Can we pick a writer?" And the team was like, "Sure, pick any writer you want." And they picked a guy named Paul Chadwick, who's pretty famous comic book writer, and picked him. And then he came over to the studio, and he's like, "Cool, I'm gonna write a story." He's like, "How do games work?" And we're like, "Oh no."
Oh god. Oh god.
Yeah, no, and writing for games is totally different structure-wise. You have to really think about it in a different way.
MMOs especially because in an MMO there is no main character.
Yeah.
Like every writer is used to writing for a main character, and now you have to write something where thousands of people are the main character.
And it's about like discovering yourself like through the experiences that you like set up for people in that game to like be their own person, but also like sort of like guide them through the path.
Well, and in the case of Matrix Online, because a lot of newer MMOs just kind of do this thing where all of the players are kind of basically the same character functionally, story-wise. But Matrix Online actually had all these really interesting components of player actions and factions would dictate what would occur with the story. And I really wish that more MMOs would go back to that format because
it's fun. It's just
so cool.
Expensive to do.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to branch your story at a moment's notice. Well, plan for it.
Yeah. I did a video recently for GameSpot where I talked about consent in gaming, and it was mainly about like sex and consent and how sex and consent is presented in games. But one of the discussions that I had towards the end of that video was about like the consent between the developers and the player, because the developers are literally building the world that the player is in, and so like what choices are you allowing the player to have or not have is also like a form of building like consent, because you're literally building the framework of the world that you're in and offering the choices that framework is built in. Which, sorry to bring it back to the thing, but it's literally about identities. It's exactly what Identiteaze is about. It's about like people building worlds and then offering choices within the worlds that they built and making it seem like it's a natural and normal part of it. And so that's a cool. It's just an interesting. I love the way that games allow us to like think about our own society and structure, and to talk about the book that I referenced that this the film is about, Glitch Feminism. It's using the metaphor of like coding and computers to talk about how we can break break systems, and how like trans people or people who are seen outside the norm, neurodiverse people, people of color are like corruptions of this code because the system isn't inherently built for us. It's not really built for any human being, but we are all told to like fit these functions. And so I love like thinking about video games in exactly that same sort of way, and how it sort of ties into all of these ideas, which I think this is actually a weird, like really good panel to like have that sort of discussion, considering there's people who are coding and like queer and gaming folks. So yeah, I think it's just a cool way to frame it.
I think it's an interesting thing too, just in general media analysis. I think games particularly draw an eye to the artificiality of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, one of the most frustrating poor forms of media analysis I see sometimes is where people will self-justify writing choices because it was a writing choice. They'll be like, well, there's a reason in world why it's that way, whatever the thing is. And it's like, well, no, someone sat down and chose to make it that way. And they do this a lot to justify bigotry, in particular within writing. Someone will go, hey, this writing trope is anti-Semitic, racist, transphobic, etc. And someone will respond with, well, the world was designed, you know, like that's just how the world, as if the artificial story is in and of itself natural. And I think it's a really interesting thing to examine, because it highlights that is the same thinking underlying a lot of the current social constructs we live under right now,
Mm-hmm.
that people view as natural when they are artificial.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of the discussion that can happen around, you know, bias and harm in machine learning and AI, where you can get this argument.
I'm a machine learning specialist, so this is like my shit. This is my shit.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I don't have like a huge amount of domain expertise here, but it's just, you know, that one of the things that I always like to think about or push back against is this idea like, oh no, this is just a technology, or it's an algorithm. It's inherently neutral because it's just, you know, math, and it's such a, you know, everything is made and built by people with a set of, you know, biases and thoughts and you know, experience, and no tool is neutral. And I think that is something that I think, you know, I think there's a lot of crossover there into what we're talking
quite
about.
Literally my last video, actually the video where I announced this project in, is called now I had a slightly different name for it, but I was testing a different one, so it's called How AI Trains Humans on Pseudoscience. And it's quite literally the video was about specifically an app made by a gender critical and feminist who made
I remember we talked about this.
Yeah, where it was an app that like used bone structure to determine if you're a woman, to let you into the app. And it's like, so phrenology then. and how it's given it's given itself a sense of legitimacy. Like people view it as legitimate because AI said it was legitimate, but it's based upon the same human biases that we program into it.
I mean, AI is just what we feed it. Like,
yeah, well, and they're not AI. They're just algorithms. They aren't thinking. They aren't making decisions. They are purely responsive to the data that you give them, which is where the concept garbage in, garbage out. I saw a couple people in chat bringing that up. But it's so important, because the difference and what gets classified as an AI, and we aren't even close to it. And there's a lot of debate if it's even conceptually possible with our current, basically the primary limiter right now is actually not software, but hardware. We can't make complex enough machines that are large enough and fast enough to remotely begin to even say that we're somewhere close to simulating a intelligence. And that doesn't make, and the problem is that in the context of AI, the field, not an object, not a noun, but the field of research is we call things intelligent within a relative context. So when you're given an algorithm, we call it intelligent if it solves the things it's supposed to solve to a certain degree within its value metric. My favorite story about this, and I'll be quiet after I give the story because I'm talking too much, but is from one of my profs back in the 90s when they were doing the first rounds of image processing machine learning work. And they, because digital photo sets were pretty rare, what they had was basically pictures of military vehicles from the USSR and from the United States. This is actually a Canadian research team at the university I currently attend. And so they run it, They get a 98% accuracy. I think, sorry, it was exactly 98.2. Is it 3 or 7? One of those numbers. But, and they're like, that's too good. There's no way that this is working this well. What the hell's going on? Because machine learning is basically black box. We don't really know exactly what's going on. And the level that we're at where we're running neural nets and things that are very complicated is trying to determine what that black box is doing is nearly impossible. Not impossible, but it's so unfeasible and time consumptive and exhausting that most people are never going to bother it. But they start manually looking at all the data. It's a lot of data to manually look at. And they realize that the reason it's getting a 98% accuracy rating is that it's not classifying the tanks it's supposed to classify as American or Russian. It's classifying the color of the sky. Because 98.7% of the American tanks were shot under bright blue skies out in the deserts. And 98.1%, 97.9% of the Russian tanks were shot with gray, cloudy skies. And so they got this amazing accuracy thing. And it was returning the data they wanted. But what it was doing was not what it was supposed to do because it doesn't think.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
This reminds me.
Yeah,
and apply that to human beings.
Oh, yes.
Thomas, you
Oh
I
my
remember.
God.
Oh, just saying, I read a study recently about like the same result where they were trying to identify or train a neural net to identify I guess moles on skin that would be cancerous. And so every single picture they fed it had a ruler in the picture. And then all the healthy skin, of course, doesn't have a ruler because you're not measuring the size of the mole. So you just train this neural net to say, oh, anything with a ruler in it is cancerous.
Oh no!
Oh my God.
Oh no!
People don't realize these problems because not enough info is out there. Which I appreciate that there's people like Dan out there teaching about these aspects because there is so little understanding about computer science and so much interaction with it on a daily basis.
Yeah. Dan,
If I could,
I've been like,
Lily was saying something.
sorry. Jessie, you were talking about that app that was supposedly like restricted to, I don't know what you would say, cis women, basically.
Yeah, cis white women will even be.
Yes.
Fair. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you talk about this. I haven't seen your video yet, but I tried to join the app, and for those who don't know in the chat, I'm a trans woman. And it let me in, no problem. And then I went to scroll the other users, and every single other one was another trans woman doing it as a bit.
Yeah, it's hilarious. No, it became a meme. It became quite lit.
Yeah.
That's how I learned about the story to write about it, is because it was a meme in the trans community, because it literally is like a pass-fail test of do I pass the TERF test to get in. But it's also fascinating because it denied what it was denying is it was actually more denying people of color, specifically Black women, because of the way it was favoring like sort of stereotypical beauty norms that are often found in like white women, also particularly like white women of certain means who are able to keep like up a certain like look and body regimen and things like that, because the person who made it herself was also doing that. And also something too that was interesting too, that just an interesting quirk of the story. So the video went up accidentally last week because of all this stuff going on with this, because I was originally going to announce this project as a Kickstarter, and the video went live for about an hour last week. But during that hour, the lady who runs that app heard about the video and tweeted about it. And in the video, in the tweet, she's like, Jessie called me a racist, white supremacist, and all these things. I'm like, no, what I was saying quite literally in the video and make very clear is we in our society, because of a lot of our invisible systems that we built upon our entire culture around, is built upon privileging cisgender folks, white folks, certain like beauty standards as well. And when we get confronted with that, we have to sort of like realize that, as like understand that that's the bias that's inherent in the system, and sort of like deal with that. But some people don't want to like think that they can accidentally contribute to these systems, so they have like a cognitive dissonance in their brain, and they'll sort of project that, say, I can't be a bad person, so these people must be calling me a racist or white supremacist because they hate me as a woman or whatever. And then they'll double down on transphobia in order to just like justify in their own brain. And in her own tweet, it was literally, she said, "Oh, Jessie called me a white supremacist racist, but in no way are men really women." Again, referring to like trans women being men. And it was just funny because it's like, so you're just doing the thing that I said in the video that you were doing, and I was really hoping she'd become self-aware and like listen to it, but it's like, no, she just did the thing that I said that she was doing.
That tracks.
Very funny.
You're saying that in the same way that the programs are not actually self-aware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The programs are also not self-aware.
Exactly, because we tend to view these systems as all of our things in our culture as like normal, and like this is the normal way to be, the normal way to exist, when in actuality, like we built these systems that way. And again, bring it back to video games, it's the same idea in video games. Like you build the artificial worlds that we make, and we view that as like, these are the rules of the world, and we become sort of see that as the normal rules of the world that you make. But we are able to understand that there's like different worlds that we can enter because of the artificiality of games, which I think as we become more and more, again, to bring it back to identities, like as we become more and more like understanding like the digital world is like a primary way for us all to interact, as we're doing now, like there will be certain like assumptions made that people will start to take as natural that don't necessarily need to be the case.
And that's why the Matrix Online is good.
And that is our TED Talk about the Matrix Online.
No, but bringing it to the Matrix and Baudrillard, like I think one of the failings of Baudrillard's criticisms in some ways is that, you know, he believed that the map was surpassing the territory, rather than understanding that at this point there are several layers of maps and they're all interrelated, but they're not perfectly over top of each other, and they cover areas of the territory differently. And there's such a deeply interweaved element of online life and IRL, and they aren't really as separate as people think or want them to be. And part of wanting to make them, I think separate, is that it makes it more comfortable. Like that's it is an uncomfortable thing to have to deal with, the fact that the stuff you say and do online has a real world impact. And I think part of that discomfort for a lot of people is that they use the anonymity of the internet to maybe do some questionable behavior.
I love Dave just photobombing Thomas the entire time.
This heavy talk.
Let's talk about biases as Dave's just like, hi, hello.
It's so important to understand that like these are not separate worlds, and it's why I think the Matrix Resurrections is such an interesting addendum conversation with criticism of and response to the first Matrix video. I definitely haven't been writing a giant script about it for like 2 years.
Well, I wanted to interrupt you. I want to toss it to the programmer folks and like game maker folks, and I'm curious like what your thoughts are about this. Like, I know Dan, you teach this stuff, and all of us kind of teach in our own ways to a degree. But I'm curious to see how you see any of this stuff sort of coming up in like the next generation of programmers and how they're thinking about it, or any of you sort of are thinking about it, because that's what always kind of excites me, is like seeing, you know, as a trans person, it's like, oh, I look at younger folks and like, wow, they have so many words and terms and ways of thinking about stuff that I never would have had. And I'm curious if that's like related in programming and coding and you know, the nerddoms that I am not a part of, but I'm like, oh, you're smarter nerds than I am.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a huge part of the discussion in the classes that I teach. I mean, it's always tricky because, you know, I so much want and enjoy having conversations around the sort of theory of computing and what are the applications and what do they mean? What's the social impact of all the things we're doing? But also, if I'm being honest, like some of the students are there and the course is designed to really be very nuts and bolts oriented. So that finding that balance and striking that balance for me is is tricky. I would say like where it comes up even more is just what I've seen in the sort of open source world over the years, and how closed and impossible and kind of toxic some of those communities have been. And you know, to be optimistic, I'm involved with some different open source projects that have really done wonderful work in bringing in new voices and you know, really focusing more on the community and then the kind of code base itself. So that's something that I'm very interested in and that I love to think about and talk about, but I could go on for too long about.
somewhat this weird thing where it is either the worst or the best of the programming world. Like it really is, because it can draw any group of people, and especially if the project is started by certain types of people, and there is an unfortunate number of far-right people within the computer science world, that you get those really unfortunate situations sometimes. I really appreciate that you talk about like trying to centralize having those conversations about social impacts. I know that a lot of universities have been receiving, like even just thinking about the one that I attend, because I used to work for the head of the department, so I was privy to a lot of random stuff behind the scenes. Like have been realizing, oh, we really need to start teaching ethics, like really focusing in on ethics. That's why like my prof for AI and machine learning, I'm not going to say who it is because I don't want to dox myself or him, but my prof for machine learning and AI, like the first 3 classes before you get to any nuts and bolts stuff is purely a discussion of the philosophy and ethics of what we're doing, data ethics and that sort of thing. And this was appreciated when I started working for the department, that they mandated additional ethics training that was specific for working there. But the industry at large is very behind on doing anything related to that, unfortunately.
If I could ask, sorry. So I do not know any amount of programming. I had a computer class in 8th grade. I made the background of a website red, and I think that was all. Honestly, it was a rush.
No, that was a genuine, like that should be celebrated.
I made a Star Trek website on GeoCities for my fan fiction. That was my extent of computer knowledge.
That absolutely
GeoCities is where I started too.
Oh hell yeah! You can. I think the website still. If you find the website, it is now all broken and formatting. I tried to make it look like a Star Trek LCARS thing, and it is awful, and my writing is awful. But it exists if people wish to find it. Anyways, I interrupted you. Really,
thick as hell. Thank you for interrupting. Yeah, so I guess I was just wondering. So my image of the open source world would be kind of like the idealistic image people tend to have of like Wikipedia. You know, like this place totally without profit motive. It must be like a super collaborative, friendly community. Why do you think it isn't sometimes?
Well,
like why?
It's not exclusively lacking in profit motives, and part of the cutthroat things that happen sometimes is related to profit motives specifically. I would say often the open source spaces that are the best are the ones least engaged in profit and most engaged in charity. Maybe charity is not the right word, but I'm going to call it mutual aid is probably a more accurate term to use. But people hear charity and they kind of get what I'm talking about. But there's a lot of things that have been built out of hackathons and things like that space, where the reason it is open source is because they want it to be available to everyone because it is helping people. But yeah, there's other spaces that are very weird.
I also want to toss it.
Do you feel like?
Yeah, sorry. I cut you off, Thomas. I was literally about to toss it to you. So.
I was just going to ask, do you feel like projects like React, that come from Meta, like those are examples of open source projects that are more meant to raise the prestige of the company where they were developed?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. Like, I mean, React Elements is a very functional set of this is getting like as someone who's done the main 2 things I've done, it's a very weird combo, is machine learning and AI and front-end UI UX design and website stuff professionally.
I feel like it's not a super weird combo.
But it isn't. It isn't. Like and because I've had to learn some database stuff, but I would never call myself a database specialist. And
yeah.
I was gonna say. I mean, one thing that I would say is that I think it's really challenging to build community in a positive and welcoming and inclusive way, especially when the actual work of the community is highly technical and can be off-putting and intimidating. And so I think, sometimes there's maybe bad actors and some maliciousness, but I think there's a lot of projects are not set up in a way where the priority is, let's make this very friendly to beginners who could feel like they could both use the tool as well as contribute to the tool. I think that separation that is often emphasized as like, no, we're the maintainers, we're the programmers, we're the developers, you're the users, is what often will cause that. And so if you come in and you're new and you don't know, am I supposed to like file a GitHub issue or post to this forum, or if I don't use the right vocabulary, somebody's going to yell at me, that kind of stuff really goes on.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and there are just I don't know, like
Oh,
one of
no,
the
I know
organizations
exactly.
that
I was thinking about the worst
yeah,
stuff, but that is a very common issue.
yeah,
100%.
and so
Like,
so
you gotta
yeah,
have
and
hit
the
standards, but like,
yeah.
And the other thing that I would add is that I think a lot of organizations are really thinking about this now, is that open source has for a very long time been the domain of people who have the privilege to be able to volunteer their time on the evenings and weekends to work on all this stuff. And not everybody is able to do that. People don't not, and so that really restricts who is sort of welcome and able to participate in a valuable way. So so I think that's something like building structures where people can be paid and compensated and credited for their time, I think is really important.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same thing I'm trying to do. I'm just relating to my own stuff, not to necessarily self-promote. I guess it is self-promoting, but whatever.
It is your stream.
I know, but I always hate promoting my own stuff. I was like, I just want to hear all you talk, but it just connects with me. Like, as a filmmaking person, part of I was talking with Aaron at the start of the stream, part of the reason that we want to do this film in this way is we want to like hire a team of mostly like trans people, queer people, people of color, women, to work on it, because they don't get to have the same opportunities in filmmaking, because like the people who are able to do film are often the people who are like able to buy cameras or are able to have like a certain amount of money or background or time to devote to like writing, where other people who are more disenfranchised just don't have time. And it's a tax on time that is, I think, a lot of what prevents a lot of people money as well, but like time as well, that prevents people from getting to be able to take part in these things. So it's like, it's just how all these same systems sort of cycle into each other in the same way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jessie,
I don't want to kill momentum, but there is a 13-month-old that is yelling for my attention, so I'm gonna have to jet. But Jessie, I'm so happy that you're doing this. This is such a cool project. I saw the trailer and I was like, this is one of the coolest things I've ever set my eyes on.
Well, before you go, I'm going to say nice things about you. Tristan, you are amazing and sweet and lovely, and I adore you. I adore your videos, and thank you for being one of the kindest people that I've seen on here, and I think you are amazing. And yes, please, everyone in the chat, if you are not subscribed to Step Back History, you all should be subscribed, because Tristan does great videos. And yeah,
it's in the chat.
Yes,
you got no excuse.
Aww.
The link's right there. Just saying.
So.
I've been sharing everybody's links every couple minutes. So like, go.
We'll talk again real soon.
Yeah, Tristan, and I'm glad we actually got to say hi. Thank you for being here, you lovely human. So take care. Take care of your 13-month-old, and I send you love.
13-month-old. Yeah, I got it.
You know what? I'm dealing with a lot right now, all right? You don't need to embarrass me on stream. You know what? Get out of here. Get out of here. I don't care. No. Love you. You're wonderful. I think someone else said something.
Jeff.
Oh my god.
It's just throwing a quick call, but one of the things you were talking about with like some of the ways that the games end up, and we're talking about how the AI recognizes in, like, I did a lot of MMO design for a long time. We used to have something we called the rule of 10, or the rule of zeros, which was because, actually, and this goes for all games, you're right, everything is designed in intentionally, but there's also all of the unintended consequences when you're developing hundreds, sometimes thousands of systems that all have to interact together on top of human nature. And so we had this rule we call the rule of zeros or tens, where like when we'd start testing a game, every time there was an extra 0 of people, everything would break. So like the dev team would start working, we'd invite in like 10 outside people to come test it. And they'd find things that even as a large team or small team, we never thought of. And it would happen again when we went to 100 people, to 1,000 people, to 10,000, to 100,000, to 1 million, that extra bit, somebody would do a thing that no matter how much we'd thought of and how much we'd worked our way through it, it would break a thing. It would break a balance or way people behaved or just everything. But literally every single time, you're like, cool, we solved it all at 100 people. You get 1,000 and somebody in that 1,000 would do a thing. And because they were all online communities, then everybody would know about it. And you'd button all that down and hopefully you'd be like, okay, we fixed this awful thing that we realized. But it was just, it's a really interesting thing when you're trying to develop software that's also made for entertainment purposes. And then that goes out to mass market with people who use it in ways you never thought of, or even that the design team didn't. Like, my most famous mistake I ever made in any video game was on EverQuest, where I was doing zone population, like basic things, setting up a zone with the NPCs in it. And we didn't have great internal communication, and I was setting up a dark elf city that they'd taken slaves in, and so it was a place you'd go from free the slaves. and we had a whole bunch of different races, one of whom were called erudites. They had not yet been decided in lore, but it was sampling going through. Erudites were the smartest of all the races, but they were also just all African-American looking descent. So we ended up with an entire room of people with the word slave over their head looking like African-Americans, because that hadn't even been decided in the lore when the initial part of the game got made. And that got corrected within like an hour once somebody discovered it. But there's all of these things that during development with a large team, you don't even think of because it isn't made yet. It's not an existing piece that gets integrated in to how things are done.
Yep.
There's 1,000 interacting things, and you can't possibly keep track of all. Even on a small dev team of like 4 or 5 developers just trying to make a small game, you get weird things. But that's really unfortunate.
I mean, that's literally what Identiteaze, again, to talk about, is it's what it's about, is like it's when we the plot of the story is that people all exist in the near future. We all live in the metaverse. We all like work in the metaverse, spend most of our social time there because the world has gone to crap. In the physical world, but because of that, like, people have to exist in these spaces made by people who have certain biases. Even like, you know, the thing I'll be talking about is like certain like people in certain power, like the Elon Musk of the world, will be biased and bigoted in certain ways. But then there are people who just forget things because they aren't exposed to it or aren't aware of it. Talking about like vocabulary we were talking about earlier, and also to bring it into like gaming stuff. Which is, again, also, by the way, why, cause, like, the tagline of the thing is like, be the glitch, because it's like, we are glitches in like people who are not really seen in norm. But one of the things I talked about in my consent video that I did for GameSpot was there was this great talk at GDC from one of the writers at BioWare for I want to say Baldur's Gate. And he was talking about how they had 3 romantic options for men and 1 for women, and how they didn't even like think about the reaction from for like women being like, well, why do we not, or people who are interested in femme presenting people saying like, well, why don't you have more options for us? And the writer at BioWare literally stated, it's like, well, my first reaction was to react angrily. It's like, well, don't you understand? We only had so much time to code. We only had so much time to do this. And it's that sort of like initial reaction from people being like, well, why are you coming at me? I was just doing the best I could with the resources that I had. But then having to realize like, oh no, we had a bias because a lot of like, you know, straight men were making the game. And so thought of putting those types of romance options in the game first. And so it's an interesting sort of discussion how these sort of like games sort of showcase these biases because of the worlds we create.
That's interesting coming from BioWare, because BioWare has the largest stable of writers of any studio in the industry and some of the highest percentage of women on that.
And I think it came from that realization.
Talking about though, too. Like that was part of.
And BioWare is a big company, so like
BioWare is a big company.
Well, I think he was talking about at that time, because I think it was delivered like 2 or 3 years ago, but he was talking about way back when they made Baldur's Gate, and I think it was because
not the new one.
Yeah, so I think it like led to them doing that because they had that realization and the willingness to self-analyze, which again goes back to what we were talking about before about like the cognitive dissonance between some people, where people will either, what they'll do is they say, oh, I can't have made a mistake, so it's thereby these people are bad for telling me I did something wrong, when it's actually honest criticism, and they'll double down on the problems and blame other people. Or people will be like, no, we're having a conversation here, and we can grow and expand and be open to that conversation. And I think that's exactly, you just said, BioWare has grown to have some of the more diverse writers, and I think it's because of that like self-awareness. And even then, you could even talk further about like things that they expanded upon in like the Mass Effect games, which I have Mass Effect back there. The game with that was like programming in like they added in like, you know, gay characters, lesbian characters, bisexual characters, but even in that there's biases, like the Asari alien character is like a very stereotypical sexy blue woman that gets to be like the bisexual character, which sort of like presents like bisexuality as like still very male gazy focused as well.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting sort of like constantly growing and evolving, but it takes us like being able to be self-aware and self-analyze and self-critical, which
to bring this around to art, like what we do in our work and things. And I think one of the most common failings, I would say, of of YouTubers in general is a lack of willingness to engage with sensitivity readers and marginalized criticism of their work. And I think part of it is that if you're a creator that gets any sort of viewership, pretty much, you receive a lot of a very specific tone of response that it's not productive. And I think it creates a reactive tendency because you're so primed to like, everybody's fucking saying ridiculous things about me, losing it in response. And I think it's really, really important. One, when you make mistakes, because you will make mistakes. No one doesn't make, no one is perfect. And even as a trans person, as a disabled person, I've had to unpack the internalized transphobia, unpack the internalized ableism. It's an ongoing process, and it's important to engage with that. But I think often people have a knee-jerk reaction, and they engage with that emotional reaction first, rather than taking 5 days and trying to go, okay, what are they actually saying to me? Because obviously, as well, and I think this gets done to the layers of tone policing that we deal with as marginalized people. When marginalized people are frustrated by something, one part of that bias is that it treats our reactions as more extreme than they are. But two, it's also just like, we should be able to emotionally respond to things that negatively impact us. And I just think about certain things that Jessie and I have dealt with since the J.K. Rowling video, for example. We're not going to talk about that stuff in depth, but just some of people's very knee-jerk emotional reactions to stuff we said there, which isn't surprising. We expected
Not
that.
to cut you off, Aaron, but I just saw a few
please
people
do.
are popping with the green.
I was about to go over there.
Yeah.
Actually,
I
I
think-
have to out. I also have a toddler that I
Thank you
need
so
to go.
much for being
but-
here.
You
It
are.
was-
Oh, sorry, I cut you off.
It was great to see you, and I hope this all goes really well.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great getting to talk to you and like meet you. And everyone should go subscribe to Extra Credits. I mean, everyone should probably already know you if you know me, but you're lovely and amazing. Thank you for being here, and I really enjoyed talking to you. And thank you for all the amazing games that you made, like The Matrix Online. Sorry, you made this nerdy trans woman very happy.
Again in the future,
Yeah.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
But see y'all soon. Good
Great
luck.
meeting you.
Bye, Jeff.
See ya.
By the way, has
Yeah.
anyone seen the video recording of the last day that Matrix Online was online?
No, I didn't see
No,
this.
it's wild. I think
It's
so. I
it's
think
an
there's some memes
emotional
about it.
video. Yeah, I mean, it's like I imagine this happens a lot with other games as well, but it's just
That's the way to check people.
okay.
Yeah, keep.
It's
keep
very
going.
worth watching if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I it's one of those, like, I actually have watched a lot of like Matrix like story stuff because I missed being able to be part of it at the time. Because again, my mom was like, you can't do online things, so don't do that. It's dangerous and scary for you. Well, like at the same time, I was like discovering my transness online and like looking up what is trans. So it's just like just interesting sort of things. But yeah, it's interesting, like communities that get built in those worlds of games like that, right? Like people like find marriages and each other in love and community within those things, which again is just like speaks to the power of like when we build systems, people will find ways to do things that no one ever expected in it, not just within the game world, but like in our own relationships with it, which I think is so freaking cool. So
Yeah, my wife met her best friend through Gaia Online of all places.
really,
And if that had not happened, I would never have met her.
oh, that's
So, yeah.
amazing. Oh, that's so sweet and lovely.
It is, my goodness.
Yeah. So okay, since we were talking games, favorite games. Does anyone, if everyone's gamer here? I don't know if everyone.
Magic.
Ooh.
Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I was literally just thinking about last week. It's like I should go to a Friday Night Magic because I haven't played Magic in forever, because I literally spent like the entirety of my budget in college on Magic cards. It was a problem.
I did the same for a little while, yeah. I don't have a group to play with here in Denver. I guess in Denver where I live, so I've just been playing online mostly. But I'm trying my best to manufacture a group of people, like tricking my friends into playing.
Well, I have
Where's Dave to play?
yes.
I would love to.
Teach Dave. I would love that if you taught Dave Magic.
I would love to learn to play Magic. I've never played. I'm like super.
Yes.
I feel like there's a lot of
Oh my God,
crossover
right?
between like poker and Magic in the communities.
Oh, there's so much
My
crossover.
comp
Yeah.
site, my comp site apartment in our student lounge. I was actually the president at one point of the student society, but anyway, our student lounge, we used to just have impromptu games of Magic. what's it called? The one with 100 cards and you have a commander.
Commander.
Commander
that's
is a
all I
very
played.
popular format because it would just basically turn into it was less about like just winning with cards and more about like politicking around the table.
That's the best part.
And
That's the
people
best part.
gather around as games got tense.
I was just doing
fun.
stuff about like social deduction games. I actually just did a podcast,
Yeah.
and I know we want to bring people into, so I don't want to talk too long. But I was talking about. I went on a podcast where we talked about like board games. I talked about how I love social deduction games because it's it as someone who is like neurodiverse, I like seeing how people like react in certain social situations when there's like a game being played. I know we played when we were on the Nebula thing, Dan. We played you Secret Hitler, and it was just it's interesting it's interesting to watch people play Secret Hitler and like learn a lot about them. It's also like Dave, we played with Dave, and Dave loves to control the narrative because that's what he does. Is his job. Like that's what he does, and he's so good at it.
It was masterful.
Yeah.
I was like, I was very overwhelmed.
Yeah.
During that experience.
Y'all have no idea.
It got intense.
There was a VidCon where Dave bought 12 copies of the game and secretly made everyone Hitler, and nobody knew.
Really? Oh my God, that's
Jesus
evil.
Christ.
That's evil.
I wasn't in that game because I was playing Jackbox in the other room, but eventually into the night I just hear the entire table just explode and yelling. So I all figured it out.
That's evil, and yet I would have loved to watch that. That is just like that's like a game show. I would watch the crap out of that.
You can only do one episode though, because after everyone knows the twist.
Yeah.
But one episode.
Yeah.
Good new Nebula series.
Oh, honestly, someone should pitch
Actually,
that.
I do think social deduction games played by Nebula creators would be fun to watch.
That would be.
Oh, that would be so much fun.
Yeah.
I think Matt was talking about like doing some sort of board game thing at some point.
Oh, that would be fun.
From extra credits.
Such a hit. I mean, who would say no to that? Like come play a game and it's your job. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I adored that Tom Scott series, the Money one. I think that's actually what got me to join Nebula years ago. We should do more stuff like that,
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun because I'm just like, what was it? There was the channel that I did the podcast in. I'll have to share the video out, but I'm blanking on their name. But it's they did like the history of social deduction about like how there's like really deep psychological stuff that goes on in those games where it's like things that don't work in everyday life actually work in social deduction. So like taking offense and getting hurt and angry and yelling at people is actually a viable strategy that helps you, like they've done studies, helps you win more in those games. And it's like it's like it can be really messed up. And then this guy who was talking was like, I'm a psychologist and I study this stuff, and I felt bad playing the games because I would learn like little tricks where it's like asking someone like during the game, if you ask, this might be a way to cheat, but if you ask someone to help you with something, it's like, oh, can you give me a glass of water or something? We'll make them feel more enamored to you and be more likely to listen to you while playing the game.
Yep.
Wow.
Favor psychology is so interesting because you think like if you ask someone for a favor, they would expect you to reciprocate, but sometimes the opposite is true where they do you a favor and now they feel more beholden to do more favors.
Yeah, exactly. Wasn't that like, was it Benjamin Franklin? There's like famous story about Benjamin Franklin or whatever who did that, right? He's like, if I want to make friends, I always ask them if I can borrow a book from them because it makes them like feel like I owe them or like they like me. It's like I never ask a favor of them or ask them to do me a favor. I ask them to do me a favor, not them to do a favor for me.
Wow, I never thought about that. For me, I just like what was eye-opening for me at games. I'm so confrontation averse that like all of it I was trying to separate the like fun aspect of everybody like being super mad at each other with the like reality of it, and I just couldn't. It was making me very uncomfortable and anxious, but it was also like it's like my fondest one of my fondest memories of that time was playing that game.
It's fun.
It was so fun.
It's interesting too because that was another thing they were talking. I'll have to share this video out. Chat, I'm sorry I don't have the video on hand to share with everybody, but I'll have to share that because one of the other things they talked about how social deduction games are dangerous because when we play a game, we are already sort of like making this like breaking like this is the social contract or like the rules that we're going to adhere to play this game. But with social deduction games, they kind of play upon emotion, and you can't like fake emotion. It's like people say, oh, I pretended to be angry. It's like, no, you chose to be angry for this time, and you are still feeling angry. And so when you finish the social deduction game, there's like actually a danger of like carrying that animosity or feeling about someone into the real world, even though we sort of have this assumption like it's just a game.
We need social deduction game aftercare.
Yeah, exactly. Just like have like a therapist after every single session.
Okay, in like 3 minutes, I'm gonna bring a batch of 4 people in.
Hell
if
yeah!
there's
Great.
anyone who is.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, I think
I'm
we're
happy.
gonna jump off the
Yeah.
game at some point. So.
Yeah, no, I'm
Maybe one or
so
two
thrilled
people
to
can
be
stick
here,
around.
and
you're all welcome
I'm
to
I'm
stay.
about to be
but-
booted.
Yeah, you're all welcome to stay, but if
Okay.
you want to go, well,
Yeah.
if you want to head out, well, let's just talk about all of you real quick before we bring on new people, because I want to, like I said, I know some of you are bigger than me, but for me, the thing that I always wanted to do with this was like I didn't want to just promote my own thing. I wanted to talk with other cool people doing cool things. So I will toss it to all of you. Lily, why don't you talk about yourself, because I just want to share like. Your stuff is amazing, and I adore everything that you do. And yeah, like legitimately, I watch this. I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? I should just
Oh
let
my
Lily
goodness.
take my channel because
I-
you do great stuff.
I love your stuff so much, Lily. And as a Canadian trans woman, I really appreciate like what you do with covering topics related to that, like the
Oh,
series you
thank
did with
you so much.
CBC and stuff. Yeah.
With CBC? Oh,
And then not
the
CBC,
healthcare one.
the healthcare
With
one, yeah.
Western, was it? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's where my brain is like.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
it's
all-
cool. Me
think
too.
properly.
Yeah, it's
So-
a big convo. So to talk about myself, yeah?
Yeah, just promote
Yeah.
yourself. Tell us what you do, and then we'll toss it to Dan and Thomas as well. So.
Sure. Well, my YouTube thing, I kind of talk about how I don't know. I kind of went into it because my first video essay like kind of blew up, went viral, and then I was like, oh, I guess this has to be my job now. This is like the first thing that I've made money on successfully.
The YouTuber story, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was working in a kitchen, which is also very fun in its own way. I actually stole this from there. But I've kind of been like gradually finding my way. You know, these days I'm thinking like, how does technology and how does social media disrupt our relationships with each other? Like how does it change things in ways we're not necessarily acknowledging? So my next video is about TikTok like content sludge. You know, those videos where you'll get like a TV show clip and then
It's such a weird trend.
it's miserable. Oh, it breaks.
hate
And
it. Because I
Yeah.
want to watch the thing that's attached, but not that, but it's there anyway.
I know, eh? And I start watching these things to like review for this video that's coming out, and I'm like, this is terrible. But I watched the whole thing maybe 2 or 3 times.
I'm unfamiliar with what
Okay,
it what.
so-
I'm also am too, because now I feel old. It's like, what are the
So-
kids
so
doing on the
TikTok
TikToks?
TikTok does this thing, like a lot of people will post TikToks and they'll post a clip from something or an interesting thing as half the screen, and the other half of the screen will be someone playing what's that? It's that mobile running game.
Subway Surfer.
That
Yeah.
one's really common. And it's awful. It's the worst watching experience of anything ever.
Is
it's
this
like-
still portrait video? So like
Yeah.
only half of the tall part of your screen?
Oh my god.
I was expecting to say like
It's like a square.
commentary or something. They're talking over it, so you just want to see the thing, but just so
That's
literally just something unrelated that's just noise next to it, basically.
It,
As
it
many
reminds
as 3 total things in the frame. Sometimes it's like Subway
Yes.
Surfer up here, like foam cutting video up here,
Oh,
and then
God, yeah.
someone talking with like background music added so they can like
It
reboot
reminds-
TV shows or whatever.
It
Miserable.
reminds me
Multitasking.
of the old Disney Channel shows where they had the iPads, but they were like iPairs or whatever. So like the screen was like pear shaped. It's like who is making videos for that screen shape?
Yes, TikTok.
Oh my
creators.
God.
Yeah. Oh,
No,
that's
That's
great.
a great question.
But yeah,
It's so
I
miserable.
want to just
I did enjoy Abigail Thorne making fun of it the other day. On her TikTok, she posted one like that.
I
I
just
gotta
wanna-
check it out.
I want to make sure Dan and Thomas get a chance to just to say their stuff too.
Yes.
But I will say again to everybody, if you like trans and queer content, which I'm assuming if you're watching this chat you are, then you should be subscribed to Lily's channel because she makes amazing videos that are deeply emotional and really sweet and wonderful. And you are an amazing human being. So I'm glad I actually get
Oh
to
my
say hi and
goodness.
talk to you. So yeah.
Yeah, like the fact that I feel like we've had this like 2-way parasocial thing going, so it's great to finally talk to
It's
you.
the weird thing with that, and I'm sure all of us can relate to this, being like YouTube people, but it's that weird thing where it's like I have a parasocial relationship with YouTubers, then I do YouTube stuff, and now I'm like in community with other YouTubers, and it's like I feel like I know you, but I've never had a chance to actually say hi, and then it's the first time we say hi, and it's like a weird like I know you, we're colleagues, but also I have a parasocial relationship. It's a very strange feeling.
I think it's this form of bidirectional parasociality where I think, particularly because we're so aware of dealing with parasocial relationships from people, the way we approach interacting with someone we have a parasocial relationship towards is very different because and I think it's a really interesting thing where there's all this mutual respect and some degree of understanding of where that person is coming from, but there's also a knowledge that you've both seen each other's artificiality in a weird way.
Yeah, it's super weird. But
Yeah.
Thomas and Dan, I would love to hear, promote yourself. Say what you're excited about. I guess the better way to put it. What are you excited about? What are you doing? What makes you happy that you're working on?
Go for it, Dan.
Okay. Well, I don't. So I guess a couple of things I would say. One is, since we're talking about open source communities, if you want to check out, I'm involved with a nonprofit called the Processing Foundation, which maintains processing and P5JS and other things, which are these creative coding tools for beginners. And the ethos there is that trying to blur those lines between contributor and user. And I don't even like the word user. That's a whole other discussion. But so anyway, I'm sure you can find it through the way people find things on the internet. So the Processing Foundation is great. If you're interested in like a nice, welcoming, warm, open source community, I'm sure there's many ways we could improve. So come and join and check it out and help improve the community. And then what I'm working on now is I haven't actually released a video in like months because I've been doing a new the first videos I made were in 2012, which was like an intro coding set of videos, and I'm using this thing called processing, and I've just I'm kind of redoing that entire series, and it's about 5 or 6 hours of content. So as soon as I can get that finished, it'll be online. So if you're a total beginner and have never programmed before, that's coming for you. Maybe it's something you might be interested in.
Hell yeah.
And then you can, after that, I'll just segue into Thomas, because then once you've learned the basics, you can go over to Thomas's channel and learn how to use the Notion API and all sorts of other magical things.
That's true. Yeah, so the most recent video I did is a 2-hour video that shows you how to build a Pokedex in Notion using the API.
Okay.
It's really good.
Oh my god. Well, adding that to my wife, I have no idea how to do any of it, but I'm fascinated. Okay.
What is Notion?
So Notion is like, it's sort of like a note-taking and productivity app, but it's very customizable. It's almost like Legos in your computer. It's the Minecraft of productivity software. And I got into it just to sort of like make my YouTube process better, and then fell in love with it, and then made a whole channel on it that somehow became my entire business. So I've just been making tutorials and build guides for that, and getting steadily nerdier and nerdier. And so last year, in no small part thanks to Daniel, I learned how to code in JavaScript just for fun. And then I was like, well, when the API came out, maybe I can learn to use that. So that was the biggest project that I did recently. It was just learning how to build a Pokedex inside of Notion with no manual data entry, just all code.
That's so cool. And the nerdiest thing, I wish I had a friend staying with me, just visiting from San Diego until today, and I wish we had this day early, because she's a huge Pokemon fan, and I would have been like, ooh, you should talk, because that's amazing. But that's great. Well,
and where are you, by the way, Jesse?
I'm actually in Seattle, so Tech Bro City is exactly.
I love Seattle.
Seattle's it's my favorite place I've ever lived in the United States. I adore Seattle. It's it's big enough that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of really cool and diverse people here, but it's also small enough of a city that you don't feel like overwhelmed, like when I was in New York or Los Angeles, where it's like a lot happening. Don't tell Dave. Mm-hmm. Don't tell Dave I said that.
Dave knows my thoughts on New York. I come here all the time, but I can't live here. But I probably will be in Seattle later this year, so I'll let you know when I'm coming.
Yes, I will buy you a beer. I would absolutely love that, and pick your brain. I'd love to talk. Yeah, hell yeah. I see Aeronox back, so I'm assuming we're bringing people in.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, gave them the warning, so I'm gonna bring them in.
Hell yeah.
Sweet.
It's going to be very chaotic, potentially.
Love you all. Thank you.
I'm gonna hop out. I'm gonna.
All right, we'll jump.
Dan and Thomas, you are lovely. I didn't get to send you the love that I sent Lily as well, but all the love that I sent Lily's way, I send both of you. You are amazing, and I adore you both. And thank you for being here, and thank you for being wonderful humans.
All right.
Thank you,
Honored
Jessie.
to
I
be
can only
here.
do half
Everybody
heart.
who's joined the call.
And then Dave
Dave.
disappears.
Dave.
Bye, Dave.
Dave's final photo bomb. All right, y'all.
Hello.